Mr. Speaker, on the 22nd of June this year, Tropical Storm Bret slammed into St. Lucia with maximum sustained winds of 65 miles an hour or 100 kilometers per hour. As has become customary, Mr. Speaker, with such weather events, it inflicted damage on key sectors of our economy. Agriculture was dealt a blow, health infrastructure was impacted, and Mr. Speaker, significantly, a number of schools were damaged in the wake of Tropical Storm Bret. And Mr. Speaker, ours is a government that has placed a premium on education. And we believe that at every opportunity, we must give the children of St. Lucia the most comfortable of environments within which their learning must be facilitated. And it is against that backdrop, Mr. Speaker, that we are here this morning moving diligently to transfer monies from the consolidated funds to repair the schools that were damaged. Mr. Speaker, approximately 22 schools were impacted by Tropical Storm Bret, namely the Mogouj Combined School, the Vidboutai Primary School, the Ave Maria Primary School, Gordon and Walcott, formerly the Anglican School, Bexon Primary, Miku Primary, Choiseul Secondary, Font Saint-Jacques Primary, Soufrière ICDC and Library, Soufrière Special Ed, Soufrière Infant School, Soufrière Secondary School. I think that's the one time the member for Soufrière, Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding we are talking about damage in the aftermath of a tropical system, it is yielding a smile from the member for Soufrière because she knows that her schools will be attended to. Moving on, Mr. Speaker, the Vieux-Fort Primary School, the Bellevue Combined School, Debarra Combined School, Grosley Daycare, Angers Combined, Denry Primary, Tirocher Combined, Blanchard Combined, Vieux-Fort Post-Secondary, and the Bas Lagoas Combined School. Those schools, Mr. Speaker, were amongst the most severely affected, and the bulk of the money that we will be receiving from the Ministry of Finance will go, Mr. Speaker, towards rehabilitation of school infrastructure in the communities that I have mentioned. Mr. Speaker, we have more than 100 educational institutions that we must maintain on an annual basis. And in the estimates, you would have seen a little more than $3 million having been allocated for school rehabilitation in this country. Mr. Speaker, we've been able to manage that amount and use it very wisely to ensure that we treat the issues as they surface in schools. Mr. Speaker, we are under no illusion that $3 million is not ideal. But in the circumstances, we in education understand. We understand the situation that the country is in right now. We know things will get much better than they are right, having improved in recent times. And so, Mr. Speaker, I have at every opportunity implored the staff of the ministry to maximize the output from the amounts that we have been given. In the case of the Vieux-Fort Primary School, Mr. Speaker, the damage was pretty extensive. And notwithstanding, I would have been given a report by the Permanent Secretary and the Deputy Permanent Secretary in the aftermath of the disaster. I made it my business, Mr. Speaker, to travel to Vieux-Fort on a Sunday with my camera to be able to appreciate and see for myself the extent of the damage. And what we noticed, Mr. Speaker, it was not just the strength of the wind that created the damage, but that the beams, the metal beams from a school that had been constructed, I think, sometime after Hurricane Allen, there was quite a bit of corrosion, and that was undermined with winds of approximately 60 miles an hour. I always have permission from the member for Vieux-Fort South, Mr. Speaker. I think we have a very cordial relationship that does not always manifest itself in the chamber, but it does elsewhere, and so I am under no pressure venturing into Vieux-Fort. I don't know if other members in here can say the same, Mr. Speaker, but I always feel welcome in Vieux-Fort. So, Mr. Speaker, that particular school was severely affected, the Vieux-Fort Primary School. And, Mr. Speaker, we immediately dispatched our team to make the assessment. We have preliminary amounts, Mr. Speaker, as it relates to the Viewfort Primary School, and the work to be done is pretty extensive. The one thing we have been able to do is to speak to some of the prospective contractors and to implore and impress upon them the need for them, Mr. Speaker, to work diligently. And if it means that in some cases they have to work night and day, they will have to, because we do not want for there to be any disruption as it relates to the reopening of school. Mr. Speaker, the Bellevue Combined School in Viewfort North was also damaged. They suffered roof damage, and this includes roof framing, covering, electricals, and the ceiling. And I did visit that school, as I did for Viewfort South, with this time the member for Viewfort North, Mr. Speaker, and in the presence of some of the staff, we were able to have preliminary conversations right there on site in terms of giving a commitment that the Prime Minister and Minister for Finance will find the monies in time for the rehabilitation of that school. And here we are today, Mr. Speaker, feeling vindicated that the Prime Minister, true to form, has found the money, and this morning we are coming to the Parliament for approval to ensure that the repairs are carried out as we would have promised the people. Mr. Speaker, the Montgouche Combined School was also badly damaged, and I think I intimated that this morning to the member for Choiseul, who at every opportunity in the Ministry of Education, and I know it happens with other colleagues of mine on this side of the House, we have tried to, Mr. Speaker, engage and include the member for Choiseul in the discussion as we discharge our duties and our functions to the members of his constituency. So the Montgouche Primary School, Mr. Speaker, has been impacted, and work will commence on that school in quick time. Other severely impacted institutions or schools would have been the Dennery Primary, Mr. Speaker. Damage to windows, and quite a few of those windows have to be replaced. And in these days, when you talk about school rehabilitation and even construction of new schools, Mr. Speaker, it is not acceptable for you to just take a plan as we knew one, lodge it with the DCA for approval. But the nomenclature has changed, and today we are talking about climate resilient infrastructure. So the repairs that we'll be embarking on, Mr. Speaker, would not be done in such a way where we just replace what was damaged. But we have to build back stronger and to ensure that whatever we put in there, Mr. Speaker, will be able to withstand whatever weather systems that come our way. But, Mr. Speaker, this is part and parcel of the Ministry of Education preparing this country for the reopening of school in September. The physical infrastructure is important, but we are doing a lot more than just the customary rehabilitation of schools, complemented by an additional $2 million to treat specifically with the damages inflicted by the tropical weather system. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, in excess of 4,000 laptops have been configured, and they are ready to infiltrate the school system. Every child in Form 1, Mr. Speaker, as we speak today, has been guaranteed a device. That device has been programmed, it has been charged, and it is in safekeeping, hoping that when each Form 1 child in this country, irrespective of the educational district, irrespective of the parents' political affiliation, every single child will be issued a brand new laptop computer at orientation. And we have agreed, Mr. Speaker, that no longer should we disrupt the term to have those ceremonies in the middle of September disrupting the programs of principals. But at orientation, we will make the devices available, and of course there will be symbolic ceremonies done not to disrupt the schools. Mr. Speaker, every single child in Form 1 will be the recipient of a $500 bursary, compliments the government of St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, every single child in this country, whether you Form 1 or Form 5, this government has guaranteed $2.6 million to pay your facilities fees. Mr. Speaker, every child in the public school system in Form 5, writing, mathematics, and English, CXC-CSEC, Mr. Speaker, the government has committed monies to pay CXC-CSEC for that. Mr. Speaker, every teacher in the public school system has received an increase, or will be receiving this month, an increase in the materials allowance as was promised by this Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, we are upgrading schools. More than 150 more learners can now access early childhood education, Mr. Speaker, because we have established 9 pre-K classes within select schools in communities around the country. And with the pre-K, Mr. Speaker, as the name suggests, pre-kindergarten, these are young children who are transitioning from early childhood centers into mainstream education. And we notice that there has been a significant drop in the national school population, and we find excess space at some schools. But, Mr. Speaker, what we must also take into consideration is that in addition to the excess capacity you have at schools, we also pay close attention to the availability or lack of early childhood services in communities. So in communities where we have the space and we realize there is a deficit in terms of early childhood services, we move in quickly, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we establish the pre-K program. And I was fortunate enough maybe 2 weeks ago to visit the setup in Montgouge in Choiseul, Mr. Speaker. And speaking with a technical officer telling how impressed I was with the setup, the height of the face basins, because of course you're dealing with 3-4-year-olds, Mr. Speaker. I mean, the setup is just so inspiring. It is just so pleasant, Mr. Speaker, that the officer said to me, wait till you see what is happening in other parts of the country. So we are, Mr. Speaker, taking early childhood education very seriously, and only recently the Prime Minister and I, in a very informal conversation, gave the commitment that more resources will be pumped into early childhood education in the coming months. Mr. Speaker, across the sector, at the primary and secondary school levels, the government expends in excess of $2.2 million annually, as I said earlier, for facilities fees. And this is something that we should never shy away, Mr. Speaker, from drumming, from echoing, and for repeating, if only for effect, Mr. Speaker. We must, because the point has been made before, that there are parents in this country. Lani moun a pays ça, Mr. Speaker. Le wèv yo tan ron a machine ka vini. Yo kadou si a machine passager ki la, ou si ça c'est 20 payan qui ka vini. Ek adam moun le ou tan ron ça, ek 20 nan ka vini ek c'est 20 payan. Ek un pain ka vendre pour $2. Lani moun qui nous vle kwey, et ben nous pas vle kwey, lani moun qui passe à même acheter yon pain pour bay ishodité. Ek même ces moun ça, yo pa ni sa ka create sustainable forms of employment pour adan yo. Yo pa ni l'argent because yo pa ka travail. Et vous ka di moi après yo ka struggle délai pour acheter yon livre diwi. Notwithstanding that we've been able to provide assistance to quite a few, and the number of persons receiving social support from the government has expanded exponentially, Mr. Speaker. The reality is that we still have people in our society who are struggling to make ends meet. And then you say to that individual who struggles to buy a pound of rice or a pound of sugar that you must find $100 or $150, in some cases $200, to pay facilities fees. It is against that backdrop that a government with a conscience can say that we are abolishing, Mr. Speaker, the facilities fees, and the Minister of Finance can commit $2.6 million. Mr. Speaker, we've had problems with school security. And sometimes, Mr. Speaker, people react to the news when they notice there are incidents where schools have been burglarized and schools have been tampered with. Mr. Speaker, we find ourselves in a very indelicate position. Monies that otherwise we would have taken to augment and to improve pedagogy or the teaching learning process, some of those monies, Mr. Speaker, now have to be spent on the installation of cameras at school to help beef up security. So when you hear people looking to politicize crime and make it seem as if crime is a construct of this government, Mr. Speaker, we have to be very, very careful with that. Because at the end of the day, when the criminals come and they are having a field day, Mr. Speaker, everybody is adversely impacted. When they burglarize a school, I am certain in every school in this country, we have children who come from homes that support all the political parties of this country. So here's an opportunity for us once again, Mr. Speaker, to implore not just the members in this honorable house, but all patriots and responsible citizens of this country to speak in one voice in denouncing criminal activity. It pains me, Mr. Speaker, for the Ministry of Education to have to take $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 that we could have used to do so much more in the school system. But instead, Mr. Speaker, we have to procure CCTV cameras and other security devices to provide security. But that having been said, that is not me in any way trying to diminish the importance of security. Of paramount importance to me as minister and the parliamentary secretary and this government and senior management personnel in the ministry is the safety and the security of the teachers, the students, and the ancillary staff in the education system. Mr. Speaker, we are going big on increasing access to higher education. This administration has promised to work towards having one university graduate in every household. And Mr. Speaker, we are keeping this promise. We have seen the scholarship offerings to our students increase significantly over the past 2 years. And we expect, Mr. Speaker, more students will access tertiary level education under the first generation and the UniPass initiative. The first generation, we've spoken about it here before, Mr. Speaker, where we are programming specifically for individuals who are coming from homes and families where we have never had a university graduate. It cannot be right and progressive in a country where some people can get by because they have the means, and others who have the aptitude, who have the capabilities, they are stagnated because their socio-economic circumstances do not allow them, Mr. Speaker, to move forward. We are bridging that gap. And last year, we enrolled 50 first-generation scholars at Monroe College, Mr. Speaker. And in the next few weeks, another cohort of 50 will also enroll to complement the 17 Monroe scholarships. But we have gone further, Mr. Speaker. We have listened to the cries of people studying online, particularly those enrolled with the open campus of the University of the West Indies. And the point was made, and the question has been asked. But if we are doing so much in partnership with Monroe, what about the University of the West Indies? And our government, Mr. Speaker, will not shy away. We will not shy away from telling this honorable House, and by extension the people of this country and the region, that we have a responsibility to the University of the West Indies, one of the best institutions in the world. And it's against that backdrop, Mr. Speaker, against that backdrop, we had a cabinet conclusion written approximately a month and a half, 2 months ago, where persons who are enrolled with the University of the West Indies open campus, they can now apply for assistance, Mr. Speaker, with their programs, hoping that the government can meet them halfway and they can successfully complete. Mr. Speaker, we have an initiative that we just launched recently, UniPass, University Package of Assistance for Student Success. Mr. Speaker, we believe that for a small island developing state, we do not have bauxite, we do not have oil, we don't have mineral resources, Mr. Speaker. The quality of your human resource base, more than anything else, will determine whether we survive in a globally competitive environment, whether we think, or whether we lag behind countries of similar circumstances in the same space, looking to improve the lot of their people. So, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Education has received and continues to receive a sizable chunk of the national budget. Mr. Speaker, it was the Ministry of Education under the Labour Party administration that ushered in universal secondary education. And the member for Vieux-Fort South, who was the Prime Minister at the time, and Justice Michel, Mr. Speaker, who was the Minister of Education at the time, when the conversation started on universal secondary education in this country, that was met with a lot of opposition by people who ought to have known better. Mr. Speaker, that was resisted, and it was being done at a time when in some parts of the world they had moved so far ahead of us that the conversation at the national level was about universal university education. But here we were in St. Lucia arguing and debating and looking to oppose universal secondary education. Education has always been, Mr. Speaker, at the forefront of the programming of Labour Party governments, not just now, but in times past. Because we understand what education can do. We understand how we can cause somebody to improve their lot in life. We understand how we can take a child who is from humble circumstances, Mr. Speaker, and beginnings, and propel that child into positions of influence where their ability will be given expression, notwithstanding what they would have had to endure in their formative lives, Mr. Speaker. Et moi, je veux dire, Mr. Speaker, that l'argent nous avons mis ici aujourd'hui, qu'au Premier ministre a pris près 5 millions de dollars off budget là pour mettre en ça emergency fund pour ça faire travail en l'école qui était tapé dommagé par Tropical Storm Bret. Ça c'est un bon bagage et moi pas si porter seulement puisque moi c'est ministre éducation et que c'est bagage ça qui fait en bas du ministre mais moi comme Mr. Speaker ça c'est un coup encore qu'au premier ministre là et puis un gouvernement là qui a venu devant qui a montré cette liste that nous qui mettre l'argent en affaires l'école puisque nous avons une éducation mais cette liste soyez et que nous savons plus que n'importe autre bagaille qui est en pays, c'est l'éducation nous qui a déterminé qui a pays nous en tant que venir. Nous devons prendre l'argent ça, Mr. Speaker, et acheter des chevaux. Et là, les gens ici qui nous conseillent que nous avons un cheval là. Moi, c'est là les gens ici qui ont dit que nous avons un cheval là pour marcher. Mais Mr. Speaker, nous ne pouvons pas faire ça. Nous devons prendre l'argent ça avec l'autre bagaille. Mais nous devons prendre l'argent ça, Mr. Speaker. Et là, les chimères qui sont mauvais. Et le Premier ministre là qui est that even moi tous les jours moi zoé about chimé pour constituency moi était like moi m'entendre m'am vieux faut parler about chimé but nous devons prendre la avec n'importe côté but we campaigned on the mantra of putting people first and any government or any country that spends and invests monies in the education of its children is a government and a country that is on the right path. And so, Mr. Speaker, with this very brief contribution, I lend my support unequivocally to the motion to transfer $5.4 million from the consolidated fund to the contingency fund to finance repairs to the schools that I just mentioned. Mr. Speaker, I believe the money will be well spent, the money will be well managed, and I have a very dedicated team of officers in the plant and equipment unit of the Ministry of Education, of course, being expertly guided by the Deputy Permanent Secretary. And I'm hoping that the enthusiasm of the new Chief Education Officer, when you take that, Mr. Speaker, and it complements what obtains at the moment, it will make for a more effective Ministry of Education, it will make for more comfortable schools, and it will make for better learning environments for our children so that they can rise irrespective of where in this country they're from, to realize their potential, Mr. Speaker, get the education that they deserve, and when they get to an age where it is time for transitioning to higher education, we will find the scholarship opportunities for those who don't have the means, and hopefully, Mr. Speaker, upon graduation, they will take their rightful leadership places in this country, and we can sit back and feel vindicated that we made the right decisions at the right times for the advancement of our country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support the motion.